Med spas are hot businesses these days. If you look around, you see one opening on almost every street corner. But are they really profitable? I think the answer might shock you. Today, we'll talk about the whys and the hows. Welcome to the Trillium Show. I'm Dr. Jason Hall, board-certified plastic surgeon and author of the new book, The Art of Aging. You can check it out on Amazon. I'll put a link in the show notes. One click and you're there. So med spas seem to be opening on every street corner in the country. Certainly in Knoxville, there's one everywhere, and there's a new one opening up pretty much every day. If you look at the numbers of med spas in the country keep just increasing every year. There's almost 11,000, I think it's over 11,000 in the United States as of last year. So they're insanely popular, but are they profitable? For outside observers for the med spa industry, you would think that these places are just printing money. You know, you go in and $300 treatment there, $500 treatment here, and you think these things are just making money hand over fist. The economics behind a med spa, whether you're an injector, whether you're a physician who is looking to open a medical spa, may surprise you. And I think before going down that road, you really need to understand the business of a med spa and understand some kind of business basics to make sure that you're not making a huge mistake in jumping into one of these things. Like I said, there are over 11,000 medical spas in the United States, and most of those are owned by PAs, nurse practitioners, non-physicians. The other, I think 30% of them or so are owned by physicians. Most of those are what we call non-core physicians. So core specialties, core aesthetic specialties being ENT facial plastic surgery itself, dermatology, and oculoplastic surgery. So those are not the people opening the med spas. It's OB-GYNs, it's emergency room doctors, family practitioners. Now, that's not a bad thing, but I'm glad that there are other people getting into the aesthetic space, but you have to know what you're getting into when you open one of these things. One of the things to note, and if you go to the American Medical Spa Association's website, they've got all this information out there. The average med spa across the country does about $1.3 million, $1.4 million in revenue. That's $1,300,000 in revenue a year. And that sounds great until you realize that that is top line revenue. That is what's coming in the door. That is not profit. And in business, if you're a business owner, you're in business to make profit. In my opinion, top line revenue or revenue in general is a meaningless number. Profit in business is really what you need to be looking at. So how profitable are these med spas? We'll get to that in just a second. But I think first things first, you want to look at startup costs for these things. What does it cost to start a spa from nothing? And just on average, you can pretty much ballpark, it'll cost you about $250,000 to start a spa. That includes finding a space, renting a space, that includes hiring staff, that includes inventory, because you're going to be selling skincare and injectables that you've got to keep on the shelves, and that includes marketing. So all of those things together are going to be, and then you add on things like computer systems and IT and internet and water and all of that. You can pretty much ballpark that it's going to cost $250,000 to just get a spa open. So the next question, you say, well, you spend $250,000, you make $1.3 million. That's pretty easy. It's a quick thing to pay off. The average time it takes for a med spa to cross over from losing money to making money ranges anywhere between a year and 2 years. So think about that. It may be to build up a patient base to where you're an average spa bringing in over $1 million a year, then it could take a couple of years. And so you've got to have a plan to be able to weather that year to 2 year span while you're ramping up your business. What goes into the time it takes for you to become profitable really depends on a couple of things. One, and most obvious, is patient flow. Do you have the volume to really support the monthly costs, staff salaries and overhead that go into it? The other is staff retention. It's expensive. It costs, mid 5 figures on average when you lose a staff member to hire somebody else, the lost revenue from not having that person in the office, and then being able to train them up to where they were at the level of the person that they're replacing. And that brings me to kind of the third part of this that I think is really important, is a discussion on overhead. The overhead in med spas is enormous. The best run, and these are the top spas in the country, have an overhead that is about 80%. So 80 cents of every dollar that comes in goes out the door to pay your overhead. The average spas probably are closer to 85, 90% overhead. So 90 cents of every dollar that comes in goes out the door. That means if you're average and you bring in $1.3 million in revenue, you're bringing home $130,000 in profit at the end of that year. That is not an insignificant amount of money, but a lot of people who speak in terms of top line revenue say, well, we made $1.3 million last year. Well, you really only made 130 grand, which is, a far cry from over $1 million a year. In bigger markets where you're spending more on marketing and patient acquisition, that's going to drive your overhead even higher. Overstaffing is probably the biggest thing that drives overhead, and then people who make the unfortunate mistake of renting space that's way too big for their office, especially startups, or going in over their head on every conceivable device trying to recruit patients, can really get themselves into a pickle and be negative year over year, have an overhead that exceeds your monthly revenue. And so that's something that you really want to watch out for, especially when you're starting out, is controlling your overhead, which kind of leads into the next part is about equipment. When you open a spa, you are going to be inundated with vendors. Companies you've never heard of are going to come out of the woodwork trying to sell you every conceivable device that you could want to try and recruit patients. And the banks are probably going to be pretty forgiving in terms of letting you borrow money to buy these devices or finance these devices. It's really important when you open a new office that you understand that the vendors are there to sell you. You're their customer. They don't care about your patients. You're their customer. All they have to do is convince you that it's a deal so that you spend the money on the device. If that device doesn't bring in any revenue for you, that's kind of your loss. The equipment manufacturer's already made their money. They don't care. And the rep that was bringing lunches is going to disappear. I'm sorry if I'm offending any of the equipment reps out there. My reps, we love you, but you're largely gone. There's an old joke, how do you make an equipment rep go away? You buy the device. And that really does hold true with a lot of these things. My advice, and what I've done in my office over the last decade, is I wait to purchase a device until I've got patients who start asking about the device, and I see an opportunity within my own practice to be able to use it. The laser platform that we've had for 6 years. And I wanted one the day that we opened, but fortunately my wife and business partner, who you've seen on social media, I'm sure, and who will have on a show here in the coming months, talked me out of making some obscene purchases early on, which really saved us and helped keep our overhead low while we were growing, until my practice grew to a point where we could use them. And now, the laser is something that we use every day, multiple times a day. But early on, we did go in on a device that we never used, and it was expensive, and we financed it, which is a terrible. Don't finance a device, because you end up paying double what the device is worth over the time that you had it. Fortunately, we realized our mistake early on. We sold it and didn't lose a whole lot of money in it. But be very careful with equipment purchases early on, and only buy the things you absolutely have to have until you have a patient base that's really going to support a new device, because the device, contrary to what the equipment manufacturers will tell you, will not bring in new patients. You will not get new patients calling you for it. You may get one or two, but you will not have a patient volume that will support and pay off, much less make profitable, a device if you're just marketing the device. All you're doing is marketing for the company so that they can sell that same device to the guy next door. One of the myths that you hear, when people are talking around the water cooler and people are talking about opening spas, is that they're very easily profitable. And I hope that what we've done today is kind of gone through some of the numbers, gone through the overhead, and that you start to realize that med spas are not easy money. It is a cutthroat world. There's one on every corner. There's lots of competition, and the overhead, just because of what it is very high. And so, going into a med spa, if it's something that you want to do, absolutely do it. Be smart about it and understand that there is going to be a long runway of not making money before you start to turn a profit. And the profits that you get out of those are going to be fairly meager at first, until you get the patient base, until you control your overhead. It's not an easy business, but it's great business. And if it's something that you are interested in doing, please reach out to me. I'd love to share my experience, and we'll be talking about more of this on this show in coming months. And the last thing I really want to touch on is private equity, because there has been a massive influx of private equity money into the med spa space. And we actually thought about this for a time, but private equity money, those guys are businessmen, which, I'll speak for myself. As a physician, I'm not. I didn't take an accounting class. I didn't take a business. I was totally focused on medicine all the way through. What we've learned in the school of hard knocks, and a lot of late nights, a lot of conversations with business owners in this space that are well beyond where we are. So know that the private equity folks are only looking at the dollars and cents. Right now, the multiples, so how much over what you bring in every year they're willing to pay for a spa, those have started to come down, and in coming years are only going to get worse. And they really require you to have all of your numbers in order. You have to be a high-performing spa, and it's hard to get to a point where you are a legitimate target for a private equity exit. And so if that is your goal, by all means do it, but do it smartly. Now, I know some of this podcast probably has come across as doom and gloom and very negative. I certainly don't intend it that way. It's more of a reality check, but you can build a spa that is profitable. And the way to do that is control your debt, control your overhead, control your spending, and take good care of patients. That probably is the biggest thing. Is don't go into the med spa world trying to sell things. We're there to fix somebody's problem. They don't like what they see in the mirror. Our job is to help them understand what they're seeing in the mirror and offer solutions to fix it, whether that's a device, whether that's an injection, whether that's a referral to surgery. But that is what we're here for. The success and profitability comes as a byproduct of taking good care of patients. So if that's your motivation, by all means, I encourage you to take the leap. Being a business owner has been one of the most fun things I've ever done. It's also been one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I wouldn't trade a minute, even the late nights when you're lying in bed worrying about things, for the freedom and the happiness of controlling your own destiny. I hope you found this entertaining. I hope you found this informative. If you've got any questions, shoot me a DM at drjasonhall.com on Instagram. Shoot me an email, info@drjasonhall.com. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the non-surgical patient care, diagnosis, and treatment side, check out my new book, Art of Aging, on Amazon. Got a link in the show notes to that. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.